Okay. Hello and welcome to Copyright Basics for Teaching. My name is Angela Lucero. I'm the Scholarly Communication Librarian here at UTEP, and I will be walking you through this workshop. So, just to introduce myself a little bit more, I've been a librarian at UTEP for 9 years, and I work with political science, public administration, and the rehabilitation sciences. Although we work a lot with people of any discipline, so this copyright this copyright advice in this workshop is meant for everyone, not just for these disciplines. So at the end of the workshop today, you will know the basic definition of fair use. You'll know how to assess whether usage of material falls under fair use, and you'll know about tools and services and resources that can help you avoid copyright infringement in the future, because that's what we want to do. We want to avoid copyright infringement and keep everything above board. Okay, so before I start speaking today, I do have to give a legal disclaimer. The content of this workshop is meant for educational purposes only and does not in any way constitute legal counsel. If you do need assistance or copyright consultation or an intellectual property consultation, and you do need legal counsel, I must refer you to UTEP's Office of Legal Affairs. The phone number is on the screen. It's 915-757-5056. That's how you can contact them for official legal counsel. This is for educational purposes only. So let's start off on even footing. What is copyright? Copyright is a legal device that provides the creator of an original work in a fixed and tangible medium with the right to control how the work is used. So that's the thing, it gives the creator or someone that the creator has designated the control over how the work is used. And the intent of this law is to give creators an economic incentive to create new works and new things, just to kind of drive innovation. That is the initial purpose, to create an economic incentive to drive innovation. But this can get in the way of the way we want to use materials in the educational environment. So when copyright infringement occurs in education, I don't ever think it's like blatant or intentional or malicious. I think that more often it's really accidental. Copyright law is complicated, and your end goal is probably just that, you want to teach and you want to provide the best resources for your students. So, what we're going to talk about first are accidental, but I think pretty common copyright infringement scenarios. I think there are a lot of ways these could play out, and I've sort of like condensed them into two different scenarios. So the first scenario for common like accidental copyright infringement relates to textbook. So like in this scenario, an instructor believes that the textbook they require for their course is way too expensive, and they want to help their students save money. So what they do is they find a PDF of the textbook and they distribute that, or they share that in Blackboard. They just drop the file in there and everyone can download it and have their instructional materials if it's through a textbook. And so I understand the goal here is to help students out, because textbooks can be grossly expensive. I mean, so you can see the image on the screen. That's a billboard um, telling students that they can get money to donate plasma to pay for their textbooks, because it's acknowledged that these things are expensive. So I understand the goal here is good, but this is copyright infringement. What the instructor is doing here is distributing an unauthorized copy without the permission of the copyright holder. So this is copyright infringement, even though the goal was pure, and it's used in an educational context. So another common copyright infringement scenario, I think, relates to video and just its use. And I think there are a lot of ways this could play out. But let me talk about one particular scenario it'll allow us to talk about a lot of different things relating to how we can use videos in the educational setting. So in this scenario, let's say an instructor wants to show the film Sherlock Holmes to their online class for educational purposes, of course. So what they do is they upload the film to YouTube so that their students can view the film online. Easy. They just drop a link to the YouTube video. So this is also copyright infringement because the film has been redistributed essentially in a public place on YouTube without the copyright holder's permission. All right. So, in both of these scenarios, the instructor really just wants to get course materials to their students. They're not trying to cheat anyone out of profits. Maybe that's not the main goal. They're not trying to break the law. But we have to be mindful that these laws are in place. And so there are solutions to navigate copyright law and still provide the resources that you want your students to have. You can use copyrighted materials in your teaching legally by practicing fair use. So, what is fair use? Here is something I promised we'd go over. Fair use promotes freedom of expression by permitting the unlicensed use of copyright protected works in certain circumstances. So it's a fair use is a section of a copyright law. So fair use, like sometimes I think fair use because it's often applied to the educational setting, it gets kind of oversimplified to where to be understood as if you're using the material in an educational setting, it constitutes fair use. And that's not quite it. It's much more nuanced than that, unfortunately for us. Um, to count as fair use, there are four factors to consider. Here are the four factors. They are purpose, nature, amount, and effect. So purpose is the character of the use, including whether the use is of a commercial nature or for nonprofit educational purposes. The second is the nature of the copyrighted work. And this means, is it instructional? Is it creative? So you can think of it as, is it fiction or nonfiction? Is what it's come down to a lot in legal precedent. The amount and substantiality of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole. So this is just the amount of the copyrighted work that you use. Are you using the whole thing? Are you using a certain portion of the thing? That's another factor to consider. And so like for the amount, a copyright law has never established like a percentage or a number of pages or a proportion that constitutes substantial. So it's very vague. So a lot of times different institutions will set a limit, just, we're going to follow this limit. So that's a little vague, but so you have to consider it on a case by case basis. And then last, the effect of the use on the potential market um, for or value of the copyrighted work. So if by distributing this work to students in the educational setting, are you eliminating the value of, are you eliminating the students' need to purchase any of the work, potentially? Are you completely, taking the economic value away from it? That's what we're considering in the effect factor. So let's consider those first two scenarios. We're going to practice by considering these scenarios a little bit more specifically, and then we'll apply the four factors of fair use to see if it constitutes fair use. It violated copyright in the example that I had before, but does it count as fair use? So in this scenario, I've gotten a little bit more specific. A nursing instructor believes that the textbook they require for their course is too expensive. They want to help their students save money, so they distribute a PDF of the entire textbook in Blackboard. Could this be considered fair use? Let's practice by applying the four factors of fair use. The first factor, the purpose and character of the use. So like I said before, you can't rely on the fact that something is for educational purposes to, fill out your whole fair use defense. The use of copyrighted work should be transformative in its purpose. So it should be, if you're using copyrighted work, it should be for criticism, for commentary, to support news reporting or scholarship, research, or parody. Those are some uses that have been identified in legal precedent. So in this case, the use of the work is not transformative. The professor is just presenting the textbook as it is, the entire textbook. So they're not using it in a transformative way. So it doesn't meet the first factor. Second factor, the nature of the copyrighted work. I said this kind of comes down to, is it fiction or nonfiction? Here are some other ways to think of it. Is it creative or instructive? Courts usually are more restrictive of fictional works because that's more of I guess they see that as more of like a work that you could potentially, I don't know, benefit economically from. And just citing the fact that it's more important to distribute factual works or instructive or nonfiction works. So the textbook is comprised of instructive factual material. It's not fiction. It's not like a creative work, like a wholly creative work. So it does probably meet factor number 2 reasonably well. Factor number 3, the amount and substantiality of the portion used. How much of the original work is being used? Is it more than necessary being used for the purpose at hand? That's another question that has been considered in court cases. Is it more than necessary for the purpose at hand? So in this case, the entire book is being used. That's a substantial portion. Maybe the entire book is necessary for the purpose at hand, but it's still a substantial portion. So I would say it fails to meet factor 3 of fair use. And the fourth factor, what is the effect on the market value for the work? So does the use that's in question, does it compete or does it take away sales from the copyright holder? That's essentially what we're trying to determine. You know, is it going to prevent people from needing to buy this? Yes, that is the point in this scenario. The instructor is literally sharing the book so students don't have to buy it. And that's not something that fair use supports. So to review, it failed to meet purpose, amount, and effect, 3 of the 4 factors. And to qualify as fair use, it can't just meet one or most of the factors. It has to meet all 4 factors to qualify as fair use. So there are options for using for there are alternatives that this professor could explore. If they want to help their students save money or help their students be able to obtain the textbook more easily, and they know if they know that it's expensive, they could one place the book on course reserve in the library. This means that they could put the whole copy on, and students can on reserve, and students can come and use the book for a short amount of time, you know, as much as they need. Um, the first few chapters could be shared so that students don't fall behind while they procure copies of the books for themselves. This might leave a little bit more time for students to procure lower cost used copies if the first few chapters are shared. And alternatively, it's a little bit more work, but this professor could explore low cost alternatives to the expensive textbook that's in use, like open educational resources or OER, or library materials, things the library already owns that could perhaps serve as instructional materials instead of this textbook. All right, so let's practice in our second scenario. In the second scenario, it's the same as I described in the beginning, but let's just refresh our memories. An instructor wants to show Sherlock Holmes, the film, to their online class for educational purposes. They upload the film to YouTube so that their students can view the film online. So we've already established this is copyright infringement. How can we avoid copyright infringement? We talked about fair use and the 4 factors of fair use, but this scenario is unique. We don't need to consider fair use here because US copyright law includes a code allowing educators to show a video in class. There's separate consideration for video outside of fair use. So let's talk about what that what that is. So the requirements for it to not violate copyright infringement, if it's a video, there are 4 requirements. First, it has to be shown during face-to-face teaching. Second, it has to be shown in a classroom or other place of instruction. Third, a lawfully made copy has to be shown. And then fourth, it has to be shown as a regular part of instruction related to content. So not just a fun day where we don't want to cancel class, but we want to have the students in there. Let's show this film, that sort of thing. So that's not allowed. All right, so let's consider this. Let's consider all 4 requirements in this scenario. So the first requirement, that the video or the film be shown during face-to-face teaching. So the video is posted to YouTube. It's not being viewed together as a class. So if face-to-face teaching has kind of, that meant to be in that has kind of been transformed, like in more recent legal precedent, to mean live instruction. So we're watching this film at the same time. So if it's on YouTube, they're not everyone is viewing it together as a class. So the second requirement, that it has to be shown in a classroom or other place of instruction. Um, so it's on YouTube. That's a public site. That's not a place of instruction. And so, again, in contemporary legal cases, the classroom has also been acknowledged to be an online space that only students and the instructor have access to. So restricted to the students and instructor. So I guess that could be like a Blackboard course. That could be your online classroom. But this was posted on YouTube, a public site. So no, it's not meeting that requirement. So third, a lawfully made copy has to be shown. So what this has meant is that if an educator was going to show Sherlock Holmes, they'd have to bring in their DVD or their Blu-ray copy that they purchased legally, and they'd have to show that one. They couldn't bring, one that they downloaded from the internet, or maybe I don't know, some obtained in some other questionable manner. It has to be one that they legally purchased. And fourth, it has to be shown as a regular part of instruction related to the course content. And we've established that, yes, this is for instructional purposes. So for in the same way that fair use it only counts if the four factors are met, all four requirements have to be met for this to adhere to copyright law and not be actually copyright infringement. So I talked a little bit about these, but there are some ways to avoid copyright infringement in this scenario. Um, One could post the film in Blackboard from a film resource that the library contracts with to ensure that viewing permissions are granted. And so, if a feature film is what's needed for classroom instruction, the library subscribes to streaming video services and even a licensing service for feature films. And those performance or public performance rights are included when we license those films, and those can also be posted in Blackboard. Uh, so that's one solution. Another is that the instructor could require that the students find the film and view it by themselves. That way it's up to them to obtain a legal copy. The third solution is that the professor leave a copy of the film on reserve in the library. In normal times when the library is open, we do have film reserves and facilities where students can watch the films inside the building. And so, just to note, uploading one's personal copy to Blackboard and requiring students to view it at a fixed time, it might be legal under these four requirements, but it's not necessarily ADA compliant since captions wouldn't be included in the uploading when you upload it to Blackboard. So that's also not a viable path. So we've talked about these two scenarios where copyright infringement has happened and some solutions to avoid copyright infringement. I want to talk about some specific solutions and tools at the library that can help you avoid copyright infringement while you're teaching. So the first one is course reserves. You can leave materials in the library or online for your students to use. So we have both print and electronic course reserves. This can be for book chapters, for entire books if they're print. You can place library materials or your own personal copies of works on reserve. Some popular items are the required textbooks, recommended or supplementary books, book chapters. That's especially popular with our electronic reserves, and articles as well. If we have the full text of the articles, we'll just link to our full text subscription for them. And this is free. This costs nothing, and this is managed through the library. So all you have to do is reach out and set up course reserves for your course, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. The second tool I want to talk about are the streaming video resources that we have. So we have, in the same way that you might subscribe to Netflix or Hulu or HBO Max or any of those streaming services, the library also subscribes to streaming services, not those streaming services, different ones, that have educational films, documentary films, and we have a few products with feature films. So you can use those in your in your teaching, and you can link directly to those videos in Blackboard. You can even show films in class if you're doing synchronous teaching online, or if it's when we're back in the classroom, you can also show these videos in class. The performance rights are included in our licensing. And every video that we have through these services are accessible. They include transcripts and screen readable, or sorry, and transcripts and closed captioning. So the third tool I want to talk about is the library's faculty services request form. So if we don't own or license a copy of the film that you want to use, we can try to obtain a license through one of our video providers, as long as it's for instructional purposes. Excuse me. So let me show you how to find all of those things. So first of all, I talked about the streaming video resources, or that was the second thing I talked about. And here's how you would find those things on our library's homepage. So this is the library's homepage. You can Google UTEP Library, or you can go to utep.edu/library. And if you scroll down and go to the Articles and Databases tab, you can click, and you can use the subject drop-down menu to find streaming. It's in alphabetical order, so we can just go down to streaming audio and video and click search. And these will list all of our databases, all of our resources that can that have streaming video or audio content. And so you can read the descriptions here. Some of them are about, there's a tool for a specific purpose. Some of them have discipline specific content. And then some of them are more general. I think the more popular general ones are Films on Demand, Canopy with a K. And then there are several. Like we have a lot of a growing number of streaming resources. So that's how you can find your way to those. You can also contact a librarian if you want specific recommendations for videos on a topic. The second solution, I talked about course reserves, and I also talked about requesting videos or other materials that the library doesn't already own if you want to use them for instructional purposes. So from the library's homepage, if you scroll down to the box that says popular links, there's this link right here that I want to point out, the faculty services request form. And that leads to this form that you can fill out to request a number of different things to support you in your teaching and your research. So you can fill out the personal information about your course as well. Do you want a library instruction class? Here's the one that you would use to request new items that the library doesn't already own. You would click here, request library resources for your course or your research. And if the answer is yes, then there will be more spaces for you to fill in information. And then if you want to set up course reserves, so if you want to leave material at the library for your students to come and use digitally or in person, you can click yes. And then there's a place for you to input some information about that. There are other sections that you can review, and these are just the biggest services that we offer for faculty to support their teaching. When you're done, you can submit this, and you'll receive a follow-up response and be connected with the people who can fill those requests for you. So copyright is tricky. If you need help determining whether your use of something constitutes copyright violation or fair use, we can help. I urge you to ask a librarian. It doesn't count as legal counsel, but we can help you consider the relevant factors. We can help you ask the right questions to see if we can, if we can determine ourselves with any amount of confidence. Whether you are, adhering to copyright law or accidentally violating it. And then we can also talk about solutions if the outcome of our questioning doesn't look very good, or if we don't have a lot of confidence in it. If you want to ask a librarian a question, on the library's homepage, we have this tab that says Ask Us, or there's a link to chat, or you can submit your question for an email follow-up using this form. The last thing I want to say this afternoon is I just want to share a fun fact for you, and that is that copyright is the responsibility of the copyright holder, and that UTEP is the UTEP library is we are not the copyright police. So we're not here to fish you out and report you to Disney or to, I don't know, NBC Universal for violating copyright. We just want to help you do things in sustainable and legal and above board ways. I hope you found this workshop helpful and that you learned some new things. Thank you so much for coming. If you have more questions, my email address is on the screen. I'm Angela Lucero, and my email address is ajmartinez5@utep.edu. You can, if you have more questions about copyright, You can ask me, or you can view the guide. I have the link on the screen, or the URL on the screen, and I'll put the link in the notes for this video. And if you want to attend more workshops like this, there are more workshops. You can find our schedule on the UTEP Campus Edge page, and you can view ones that are coming up in our Scholarly Communication Workshop series. I hope you find something useful and that we see you at a session in the future. Thank you.